I'm Frances, 60 years old, and recently retired from teaching third grade at Lincoln Elementary. After my husband Charles passed 5 years ago, I've been living alone in our home of 35 years in Lexington, just outside Boston. The two-story colonial holds every memory of our life together, from raising our daughter to holiday gatherings. Last month, my stepson Thomas and his wife moved in temporarily while I recovered from a fall. Yesterday, I came home early from physical therapy and found something that stopped me cold. If betrayal had a physical form, it was my bed sitting in our unheated garage. If you're watching this video, I'd love to know where you're tuning in from. Please hit that like button, subscribe to my channel, and let me know in the comments if you've ever had family members take advantage of your kindness. Now, let me tell you what happened next. The house on Maple Street wasn't particularly grand, but Charles and I had poured 35 years of love into making it a home. We'd bought it when property values in the area were reasonable, and over the decades, we'd updated the kitchen, finished the basement, and added a sunroom where I spent most mornings with my coffee and crossword puzzles. The neighborhood had flourished around us, with new shops, better schools, and improved parks, driving property values up. What we'd purchased for $120,000 in the late 80s was now worth over $800,000, a fact that hadn't escaped Thomas's notice. Charles had always been the bridge between me and Thomas. I met Charles when Thomas was 7, and while we were cordial, we never developed the close bond I shared with my biological daughter, Amanda. Thomas had always been a serious child, focused on achievement and material success. He'd gone into finance, married. Melanie had 2 children, and built what appeared to be a perfect life in Connecticut, about 2 hours away. After Charles died from a sudden heart attack, Thomas started calling more frequently. Initially, I appreciated the attention, thinking perhaps grief had awakened his desire for family connection. Our conversations often drifted to the house neighborhood developments and my plans for the future. In retrospect, the signs were there from the beginning. "Have you thought about what you'll do with all this space, Frances?" he'd asked during a visit last Thanksgiving. "It's a lot for one person to maintain." "This is my home," I'd replied simply. "I have no plans to leave." 3 months ago, my arthritis flared up badly. I'd been managing it for years, but this episode was different, leaving me struggling with stairs and daily tasks. Thomas called the day after I mentioned it to Amanda. "Frances, Melanie, and I have been talking. We think we should come stay with you for a while, just until you're back on your feet. The company has an office in Boston I could work from, and Melanie can work remotely. The kids would love to spend time with their grandmother." I hesitated, but ultimately agreed. Having help around the house during my recovery seemed sensible, and part of me hoped this might be an opportunity to finally build a closer relationship with my stepson. They arrived with far more luggage than seemed necessary for a temporary stay. Within days, Melanie had rearranged the kitchen to her liking. By the end of the week, Thomas had moved my craft supplies from the spare bedroom to make space for their children. "We need a proper setup for the kids' schoolwork," Melanie explained when I questioned the change. "Your crafting can be done in the sunroom, can't it? It has better light anyway." Small changes accumulated. My routines were disrupted by their schedules. My favorite armchair was relocated to make room for a gaming setup for their teenage son. My opinion on dinner plans was sought less and less frequently. The television that once played my preferred mystery shows now blared their children's programs. I tried to be understanding. They were making sacrifices to help me after all. But the growing sense that I was becoming a visitor in my own home gnawed at me constantly. The first real confrontation came about a month after they moved in. I returned from a doctor's appointment to find my late husband's oak desk being carried out the front door by two movers. "What's happening?" I asked, alarmed. Thomas appeared from the kitchen. "Oh, we're just making room for a better workspace. That old desk takes up too much space, and I need somewhere efficient to work from home." "That was your father's desk," I said, my voice shaking slightly. "He refinished it himself." "It's outdated, Francis," Melanie chimed in from behind him. "And frankly, it doesn't fit the aesthetic we're trying to create in that room. We found a gorgeous, modern desk that will open up the space." "You didn't ask me," I said quietly. Thomas sighed, that particular exhalation that suggested I was being difficult. "We didn't think you'd mind, considering all the improvements we're making. The house needs updating, Francis. Dad always said he wanted to modernize, but never got around to it." That wasn't true. Charles had loved the traditional elements of our home, but arguing seemed pointless as the desk was already halfway out the door. "Where are you taking it?" I asked. "Storage unit," Thomas replied casually. "We rented one for some of the bulkier items that are cluttering up the place." That night, I called Amanda in tears. "They're taking over, honey. I feel like I'm disappearing in my own home." "Mom, this doesn't sound right. Do you want me to speak with Thomas?" "No," I said quickly. "They're helping me. I don't want to seem ungrateful. Maybe I'm just being too sensitive." "It's your house," Amanda reminded me firmly. "Dad left it to you, not to Thomas. Don't let them bulldoze you." I promised to be more assertive, but the truth was that my physical discomfort made confrontation exhausting. It was easier to acquiesce than to fight. A week later, Thomas approached me about the property taxes. "I was looking at the bill, Francis. It's outrageous what they're charging you." "The neighborhood has improved a lot," I explained. "Values have gone up. It's not sustainable for someone on a fixed income," he pressed. "Have you considered downsizing? We could help you find something more manageable, and the sale of this place would set you up comfortably." "I'm not interested in selling," I stated clearly. Later that evening, I overheard Thomas and Melanie talking in the kitchen. "She's being stubborn," Thomas said. "Mom doesn't need all this space. It's wasteful." "Give it time," Melanie replied. "She'll realize it makes sense." Meanwhile, I've been looking at paint samples for the living room. "That wallpaper has to go." I retreated quietly to my bedroom, feeling like an intruder, eavesdropping on the rightful owners of the home, rather than the other way around. The next morning, I tried to establish some boundaries. I called a family meeting and explained that while I appreciated their help, I needed to be consulted about changes to the house. Thomas nodded agreeably. "Of course, Francis. We're just trying to help, but we understand it's your home." Melanie smiled tightly. "We only want what's best for you." Their words were conciliatory, but their actions in the following days told a different story. My requests to keep certain spaces untouched were met with explanations of why changes were necessary. My preferences were acknowledged and then quietly overridden. Each small confrontation left me feeling more tired and less certain of my footing. 2 months after Thomas and Melanie moved in, I fell in the shower. My arthritic knee gave out, and I crashed against the tile, hitting my hip and shoulder. Thomas found me and called an ambulance. At the hospital, I was diagnosed with a hairline fracture in my hip that, while not requiring surgery, would significantly limit my mobility for at least 6 weeks. The doctor spoke more to Thomas than to me, a common occurrence that irritated me, but which I lacked the energy to correct. "She'll need physical therapy 3 times a week," the doctor explained, "and she should avoid stairs as much as possible during the initial recovery period. When we returned home, Thomas called an impromptu family meeting with Melanie and their 2 children, Jason and Lily. "Francis's recovery is our priority now," he announced in a tone that suggested he was taking charge of a crisis situation. "We'll need to make some adjustments to ensure she can heal properly." "What kind of adjustments?" I asked cautiously. "For one thing, your bedroom upstairs isn't going to work," Melanie said. "The doctor was clear about avoiding stairs." "We'll need to reorganize things," Thomas continued. "And since it looks like we'll be staying longer than planned, we should make the arrangements more permanent." "How permanent?" I asked. "Let's just focus on your recovery for now," Thomas deflected. "Melanie and I will handle the household affairs, so you don't have to worry about anything." In the days that followed, my diminished mobility made me increasingly dependent on them. Thomas drove me to medical appointments. Melanie prepared meals according to her idea of what was healthy, ignoring my preferences. Their children were assigned chores that gave them access to every part of my home, including my bedroom and bathroom, eroding the last vestiges of my privacy. A succession of workers began arriving at the house. First, it was a painting crew that transformed my blue living room to a stark white. Then, flooring contractors replaced the carpet in the dining room with hardwood. Each change was presented to me as a fait accompli, with explanations focusing on cleanliness, modernization, or increasing property value. "We're taking care of these improvements for you, Francis," Thomas would say whenever I questioned a change. "You won't have to worry about these things falling into disrepair anymore." The implication that I had let the house deteriorate stung, but I had neither the energy nor the allies to fight effectively. Amanda called regularly, her concern growing with each conversation, but her own family and job commitments kept her in Chicago, unable to intervene directly. The most painful moment came when I discovered Charles's favorite leather armchair was gone. "Where's the chair?" I asked, staring at the empty corner where it had stood for decades. "It was worn out, Francis," Melanie replied without looking up from her laptop. "We donated it and ordered a new recliner that will be better for your recovery. It arrives next week." That night, I cried myself to sleep, clutching Charles's sweater that I had preserved all these years. The house was becoming unrecognizable, and with it, the tangible connections to my past were vanishing one by one. 6 weeks into my recovery, I was making progress. Physical therapy was helping, and I could move around with a cane rather than a walker. My doctor was pleased with my improvement, suggesting I might be back to my baseline within another month. On Thursday, I finished my therapy session early. The therapist had another patient cancel, so we completed my exercises, and I called a rideshare to take me home instead of waiting for Thomas to pick me up as planned. It was just past noon when I arrived, expecting the house to be empty, since Thomas was at work, and Melanie had mentioned taking the kids shopping. As I approached the front door, I noticed an unfamiliar van parked in the driveway with Elite Home Renovations painted on the side. Confused, I entered the house to the sound of power tools and male voices coming from upstairs. Using my cane for support, I made my slow way up the stairs, my confusion turning to alarm with each step. The noise was coming from my bedroom. I pushed open the door to find 2 workers tearing out my closet. My bedroom furniture was gone. The walls had been stripped of the floral wallpaper I had selected with Charles decades ago. Drop cloths covered the hardwood floors, and paint cans stood in one corner. "Excuse me," I said, my voice barely audible over the noise. "What are you doing in my bedroom?" One of the men turned off his drill and looked at me in surprise. "Ma'am, are you Mrs. Davenport. I'm Frances Davenport. This is my bedroom. Who authorized this work? Mr. Thomas Davenport, the worker replied, pulling out a work order. We're converting this to a master suite with an expanded bathroom and walk-in closet. My heart pounded in my chest. Where are my things? My furniture? My clothes? The worker looked uncomfortable. I think they were moved yesterday. We just arrived this morning to begin demolition. I thanked him tersely and made my way back downstairs, a sense of dread building with each step. I checked the guest room first, then the study, finding no sign of my belongings. Finally, I opened the door to the attached garage. There, wedged between boxes of holiday decorations and garden equipment, was my bed. My dresser had been pushed against the oil-stained concrete wall. Plastic storage bins contained what looked like my clothing and personal items. The space was cold, smelling of motor oil and dust. A single, bare bulb provided inadequate light in the windowless space. I stood there, leaning heavily on my cane, unable to process what I was seeing. This garage had never been properly insulated. It was freezing in winter, sweltering in summer, and home to the occasional mouse or spider. And this was where they expected me to sleep. I heard the front door open and Melanie's voice calling out to her children. Taking a deep breath, I made my way back into the house. Melanie's smile faltered when she saw me. Frances, you're home early. Where are my belongings? I asked quietly. Thomas chose that moment to walk in carrying shopping bags. He froze upon seeing my expression. Frances, we can explain, he began. Please do, I said, surprising myself with how steady my voice sounded, despite the rage and hurt coursing through me. We needed to make some changes to accommodate everyone more comfortably, Thomas said cautiously. Since you've been having trouble with the stairs, we thought it made sense to move you to a ground floor location. In the garage? I asked incredulously. It's a temporary solution, Melanie jumped in. We're planning to convert it properly into a comfortable suite for you. With your mobility issues, having everything on one level makes the most sense. And you didn't think to discuss this with me first. We wanted to surprise you, Thomas said weakly. The renovation upstairs will take a few weeks, and by then, we'll have the garage conversion plans ready. I looked at them both, finally, seeing with perfect clarity what I had been denying for months. This wasn't about helping me. This was about taking my home, piece by piece, room by room. I'll be staying in a hotel tonight, I said simply. That's unnecessary, Thomas protested. We've set up the bed comfortably. It's just for a short time. I'm not sleeping in the garage, I stated, turning toward the door. I'll call a cab. You're overreacting, Melanie said, her tone shifting from placating to annoyed. We're making these changes for your benefit. I didn't respond. I walked out the front door, pulled out my phone, and called Amanda. As I waited on the porch for my ride, Thomas came out. Frances, be reasonable. We've put a lot of thought into making this work for everyone. The house is too big for just you, and this arrangement benefits the whole family. It's my house, Thomas, I said, meeting his gaze directly. Not yours. Dad would have wanted us to look after you, he pressed, to help you make sensible decisions. Your father, I corrected him, would be ashamed of how you're treating me. The cab arrived, then, saving him from having to respond. As we drove away, I looked back at the house that no longer felt like home, a plan already forming in my mind. I spent that night in a modest hotel near downtown Lexington. After a long conversation with Amanda, who offered to fly in immediately, I assured her I needed time to think before accepting her help. Instead, I made another call to someone who could offer more practical assistance. Victor Patel had been Charles's friend for over 30 years and was now a semi-retired real estate attorney. We'd remained close after Charles's passing, meeting occasionally for coffee and keeping in touch via email. I explained my situation, not bothering to hide my tears, as I described finding my bed in the garage. "Francis, that's unacceptable," Victor said firmly. "You know the house is entirely yours. Yes, Charles left it to you, specifically in his will, not jointly to you and Thomas." "Yes, but they've made so many changes already. Changes can be undone. What matters is the deed, which is in your name alone. You have every legal right to ask them to leave." "I don't think it's that simple anymore, Victor. The dynamic has shifted too far. Even if they left the house, doesn't feel like mine anymore." There was a pause before Victor asked, "Are you considering selling?" "I'm considering regaining control of my life," I replied. "The house has so many memories, but what's happening now is tainting them all. Maybe it's time to let go. If you're serious, I know someone who might be interested. Michael Braddock, a developer who specializes in properties in established neighborhoods. He pays cash and can close quickly." "How quickly?" I asked. "If the circumstances are right, as little as a day or two." He did a similar deal for another client of mine last month. Older home in Winchester, needed to sell urgently due to health issues. Michael paid fair market value, all cash, closed in 48 hours. I thought about Thomas and Melanie's shocked faces. If I returned with the news that the house was sold, the house they were so busily renovating to suit their needs, the house they assumed would eventually be theirs. "Can you arrange a meeting with him tomorrow?" I asked. "I'll call him first thing in the morning," Victor promised. After hanging up, I sat on the edge of the hotel bed, my emotions a turbulent mix of grief, anger, and a strange sense of liberation. The house on Maple Street had been my sanctuary for 35 years, the backdrop to my marriage, my career, my life as a mother. Letting it go would be painful, but the alternative, watching it be dismantled and remade without my consent while I slept in the garage, was unthinkable. I slept surprisingly well that night, better than I had in months. In the morning, Victor called to confirm that Michael would meet us at his office at 11 a.m. I dressed carefully in clothes I'd hastily packed, trying to look composed and businesslike, despite the chaos of my situation. Michael Braddock turned out to be a man in his 50s, with salt and pepper hair and a forthright manner that I appreciated. After Victor explained my circumstances, in general terms, Michael asked direct questions about the property, its condition, and why I wanted to sell so quickly. "I'll be honest with you, Mrs. Davenport," he said. "I typically look for properties I can renovate and flip or hold as rentals. Your neighborhood has strong appreciation potential, which makes it attractive to me. I can offer you $775,000 cash, with closing as soon as tomorrow if you want." The offer was below market value, but not insultingly so. Given the circumstances, the speed and certainty were worth the discount. "Would it be possible to include a condition that the current occupants have 30 days to vacate?" I asked. Michael nodded. "That's standard. I'd provide formal notice immediately, but 30 days is reasonable for them to find new arrangements." Victor reviewed the preliminary paperwork, with me explaining each document carefully. By 1 p.m., I had signed a purchase agreement with closing set for the following day at noon. Michael provided a substantial, good faith deposit, which Victor would hold in escrow. That afternoon, I went to my bank and opened a new account in my name, only ensuring Thomas wouldn't have access to the proceeds from the sale. I then called Amanda to update her on my decision. "Are you sure?" About this, Mom? She asked, concern evident in her voice. It's happening so fast. I've never been more sure of anything, I replied. I can't live like this, Amanda. They put my bed in the garage. What comes next? A tent in the backyard? I understand, she said after a moment. You're always welcome to stay with us while you figure out your next steps. Brian and the kids would love having you. Thank you, honey. I might take you up on that soon. My next call was to a storage company, arranging for a unit where I could temporarily house the personal items and mementos I couldn't bear to part with. I hired a specialized moving service that could pack and transport such items discreetly and quickly. That evening, I returned to the house, steeling myself for the confrontation that would inevitably come. I found Thomas and Melanie in the kitchen, looking concerned. Francis, we've been worried sick, Thomas said as I entered. Where have you been? I stayed at a hotel, I replied calmly. I needed time to think. That was completely unnecessary, Melanie said. We told you the garage is just temporary. I've made some decisions, I said, ignoring her comment. I'll be staying here tonight, but in the guest room, not the garage. Tomorrow, some people will be coming to collect certain items that belong to me personally. I'd appreciate it if you'd allow them to work unimpeded. Thomas frowned. What items? What are you talking about? Personal belongings with sentimental value, I said vaguely. Photos, Charles's things, some furniture that was in my family before I married your father. But we're in the middle of renovations, Melanie protested. This isn't a good time to be moving things around. Nevertheless, it's happening tomorrow, I stated firmly. Now, if you'll excuse me, I'm tired. It's been a long day. I left them exchanging worried glances and went to the guest room, locking the door behind me. In the privacy of that small space, I allowed myself a small smile of satisfaction. By this time, tomorrow, everything would change. I set my alarm for early morning, not wanting to miss a moment of what promised to be a memorable day. I woke at 6, well before Thomas and Melanie typically stirred. Moving quietly through the house, I gathered a few small treasures that I couldn't bear to leave behind. The small jewelry box Charles had given me on our first anniversary photo albums that chronicled our life together, the handmade quilt my mother had created for our wedding. I placed these items in a suitcase and set it by the front door. At 7:30, the specialized movers I'd hired arrived as scheduled. I had provided them with a detailed list of items to be carefully packed and transported to the storage unit. These included Charles's books, family heirlooms, and artwork that held special meaning. The team worked efficiently and discreetly, guided by my whispered instructions. Thomas appeared in the hallway in his bathrobe just as they were wrapping a portrait of my parents. "What the hell is going on?" he demanded, his voice rising with alarm. "I told you last night that some people would be collecting my personal items," I replied calmly. "This looks more like you're moving out," he said, eyes narrowing. "What are you planning, Francis?" "I'm securing my belongings. Nothing more." Melanie joined him, already dressed for the day. "Why are these men taking the painting from the hallway that belongs to the house?" "Actually, it belongs to me," I corrected her. "It's a portrait of my parents that I inherited long before I met Charles." The movers continued their work professional and focused despite the tension. By 9:30, they had loaded everything on my list into their truck and departed for the storage facility. Thomas followed me back inside, his expression a mixture of confusion and suspicion. "You need to explain what's happening," he insisted. "This isn't normal behavior." I have an appointment at noon, I said, instead of answering directly. I need to get ready. I retreated to the bathroom to shower and dress, ignoring his frustrated questions. When I emerged, dressed in one of my favorite outfits, both Thomas and Melanie were waiting. "We're concerned about your mental state," Melanie said, in a tone that suggested she was speaking to a child. "These impulsive actions, staying at hotels, removing things from the house, it's not like you." "I agree," I said pleasantly. "I haven't been myself lately, but that's changing today." At 11:30, Victor arrived to drive me to the closing. Thomas intercepted us at the door. "Victor, what are you doing here?" "Hello, Thomas," Victor replied coolly. "I'm here to assist Francis with some legal matters." "What legal matters?" Thomas demanded, looking between us. "Francis has asked me not to discuss the details with you at this time," Victor said professionally. "Now, if you'll excuse us, we have an appointment to keep." We left Thomas standing in the doorway, his expression darkening as we walked to Victor's car. The closing proceeded smoothly at the title company's office. Michael Braddock brought a cashier's check for the full amount, and I signed the necessary paperwork transferring ownership of the house on Maple Street to him. By 12:45, it was done. The house I had lived in for 35 years now belonged to someone else. "Would you like me to accompany you back to the house?" Michael asked as we prepared to leave. "Sometimes these situations can become contentious." "I would appreciate that," I admitted, "just until I collect my suitcase and explain the situation." We arrived back at the house around 1:30. Thomas's car was still in the driveway, indicating he had not gone to work. Victor, Michael, and I walked to the front door together, and I used my key one last time. Thomas and Melanie were in the living room, both looking up in surprise as the three of us entered. "Francis, what's going on? Who is this?" Thomas asked, eyeing Michael suspiciously. "Thomas, Melanie, this is Michael Braddock," I said clearly. "He's the new owner of this house." There was a moment of perfect silence as they processed my words. "What are you talking about?" Thomas finally managed, his voice strangled. "I've sold the house," I stated simply. "The closing was completed about an hour ago. Mr. Braddock now owns the property." Melanie laughed nervously. "That's impossible. You can't just sell a house in a day." "Actually, she can and did," Victor interjected. "As the sole owner of the property, Francis had every legal right to sell it. Mr. Braddock is a cash buyer who specializes in expedited transactions." "This is insane," Thomas sputtered, his face reddening. "You can't do this without discussing it with us first. We live here too, just as you discussed moving my bed to the garage with me first," I asked quietly. Thomas flinched as if I'd slapped him. "That was different. We were trying to help you." "Mr. and Mrs. Davenport," Michael said, addressing Thomas and Melanie. "As the new owner, I'm providing you with formal notice that you have 30 days to vacate the premises, as stipulated in the purchase agreement. I'll be sending written notification by certified mail as well, but consider this your official verbal notice." "This won't stand," Thomas said, his voice rising. "I'll fight this legally. You can't just throw us out. You're welcome to consult with an attorney," Victor replied calmly. "But I assure you the sale is legal and binding. You have no ownership claim to this property, and as tenants, without a lease, 30 days' notice is both legal and generous." I walked to the entryway where I'd left my suitcase that morning. "I'll be staying with Amanda for a while," I said to no one in particular. "I've taken the items of personal significance to me. The rest can be sorted out during the 30-day period." "Mom, please," Thomas said suddenly, shifting to a more plaintive tone using the maternal address he rarely employed. "Don't do this. We can work something out. We'll move your bed back upstairs." "It's already done, Thomas," I said, meeting his eyes. "You wanted the house so badly that you were willing to relegate me to the garage. Now, you have 30 days to find somewhere else to put your own bed." With that, I picked up my suitcase and walked out the front door, Victor close behind me. As we reached his car, I heard Thomas shouting from the porch, but I didn't look back. The weight that had been pressing on my chest for months seemed to lift with each step I took away from the house. "Are you all right?" Victor asked as we drove away. "I will be," I replied, watching the familiar streets of my neighborhood pass by the window. I think I just took the first step toward making sure of that. The first night at Amanda's home in Chicago, I cried myself to sleep. Not from regret, but from the complex mixture of grief, relief, and disorientation that comes with closing such a significant chapter of one's life. The house on Maple Street had been more than walls and a roof. It had been the container for 35 years of memories, the physical space where my life with Charles had unfolded. Letting it go felt like losing him all over again in some ways. Amanda was wonderfully supportive, giving me space when I needed it, and company when the silence grew too heavy. Her husband Brian converted their home office into a comfortable bedroom for me, and their teenage children made earnest efforts to include me in their activities. "How long do you think you'll stay, Mom?" Amanda asked a few days after my arrival. "You know you're welcome as long as you need." "Just until I figure out my next steps," I assured her. "I don't want to intrude on your family life indefinitely." "You're part of our family life," she insisted. "But I understand wanting your own space again." Thomas called repeatedly during those first days. I let most of his calls go to voicemail, not ready to engage with his anger or manipulations. His messages evolved from outraged, "How could you do this to your own family?" to placating, "We can still fix this," to finally, grudgingly accepting reality, "We've found an apartment." Victor kept me updated on the legal aspects. Thomas had indeed consulted an attorney, but was informed that he had no grounds to contest the sale. The 30-day notice period was proceeding as planned, and Michael Braddock reported that Thomas and Melanie were slowly moving their belongings out of the house. 2 weeks after selling the house, I received a surprising call from Melanie. "Francis," she began awkwardly when I answered, I wanted to apologize. What we did with your bedroom was wrong. I see that now." Her apology caught me off guard. "Thank you for saying that, Melanie." "Thomas is still angry," she continued. "He feels betrayed. But I told him we crossed a line. No one should have to sleep in a garage." We spoke for a few more minutes, the conversation stilted, but civil. When we hung up, I felt a small knot of tension release. The apology didn't undo the hurt, but it provided a measure of validation that I hadn't overreacted. With the proceeds from the house sale safely in my account, I began exploring options for my future. Amanda suggested I consider buying a condominium in Chicago to be near her family. The idea had appeal, but I also craved independence after months of feeling controlled and diminished. I started researching smaller homes and condominiums in various locations, including Massachusetts, where I had spent most of my adult life, and Virginia, where I had grown up. I connected with a financial advisor who helped me create a plan for making my retirement savings and the house proceeds last through my later years. "You're in a strong position, Francis," the advisor assured me. "The house sale has given you significant financial flexibility." As the weeks passed, my confidence grew. The arthritis that had made me so vulnerable continued to improve with regular physical therapy. I joined a senior yoga class at a community center near Amanda's home and found the gentle stretching helped both my body and mind. 1 month after leaving Lexington, I visited a small condominium development in a suburb of Chicago. The moment I walked into a ground floor unit with large windows overlooking a shared garden, something clicked. The space was manageable, all on one level, and required minimal maintenance. Most importantly, it felt like a place where I could start fresh. "I think this is it," I told Amanda, who had accompanied me on the viewing. "It's lovely, Mom," she agreed. And only 20 minutes from us. I made an offer that afternoon. 3 weeks later, I moved into my new home, a space that was entirely mine, arranged according to my preferences, filled with the treasured items I had rescued from the house on Maple Street. Thomas and I eventually re-established limited contact. Our relationship would never be what it might have been, but we found a way to communicate civilly for the sake of family cohesion. He and Melanie moved to a rental house in Connecticut, closer to his original office, their plans for claiming my home permanently thwarted. Sometimes I miss the house on Maple Street, particularly in quiet moments when memories of Charles feel most vivid. But I don't regret my decision. Finding my bed in the garage that day was painful, but it forced me to confront what was happening and take decisive action. 6 months after moving into my condominium, I received a letter from Michael Braddock. He had renovated the house and sold it to a young family with 3 children. He included a photo of the property, beautifully updated, but still recognizable as the home Charles and I had loved. "Thought you might like to know your house has a good new family taking care of it," Michael wrote. "They remind me a bit of what I imagine you and Charles were like when you first moved in." I placed the photo in an album not with sadness, but with a sense of rightness. The house would continue to be a home just for a different family now. Meanwhile, I had created a new home for myself, one where no one would ever relegate me to the garage or make decisions for me without my consent. The betrayal I experienced led to one of the most difficult decisions of my life, but also to a renewed sense of agency and self-respect. Sometimes, the most painful moments become catalysts for necessary change. In my case, finding my bed in the garage ultimately led me to reclaim control of my life and find a new place to belong on my terms. Have you ever had to make a difficult decision that changed the course of your life? Or have you experienced family members trying to take advantage of you? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments. Your experiences might help others who are facing similar situations. Don't forget to like this video and subscribe to my channel for more stories about standing up for yourself and finding strength in difficult times. Thank you for listening to my journey. And remember, it's never too late to take back control of your life.